Hello, my name's George and I have dementia. I was diagnosed nearly 9 years ago now. And I was going to come along and do a sort of training talk with you. But unfortunately, I can't come that day. So instead, I thought I'd make a film, just a shortish film, probably half an hour. And you could watch it whenever you want. You could watch it in bits to make it easier for you. First of all, why am I doing this? What are my credentials? Why should you believe the word I say? All right, so as I said, I was diagnosed with mixed dementia about 8 or 9 years ago. I've been working ever since, locally and nationally, to improve diagnosis and post-diagnostic support for people with dementia. Ever since that diagnosis, really. I founded and chaired the Shropshire, Telford and Wrekin Dementia Action Alliance. That would have been about 2015, and I chaired it for I think 5 years, and that became quite successful. I was a dementia champion, well I am, and I've delivered a number of Dementia Friends sessions, including at Churchmere Practice in the past. I have been chairing the Shropshire, Telford and Wrekin Dementia Steering Group, which is pretty much across the health economy. So it's social care, voluntary and healthcare organisations for the last 5-6 years. And in that role, I have led the development in a very co-production way of the new model for dementia support and care in Shropshire and Telford and Wrekin, which is now being introduced, including, as you, I hope, know, Admiral Nurse Service across Shropshire, which started back in December. I also work with Dementia UK, which is the organisation that provides training for Admiral nurses. I work with them to chair their lived experience group to help them develop. And I'm now becoming more and more involved in research projects as a co-investigator around the country in areas to do with dementia, like, for example, use of restraint in hospitals or primary care approaches to sleep difficulties. I also started, and I facilitate still, the Riversiders Deep Group, which is a dementia engagement and empowerment project group, in other words, peer support group. I started that in 2016, still going. We've got quite a few members. So that's why I have a pretty good knowledge, both of my own dementia, but also dementia generally. So I'm going to divide this into two sections. First of all, I'm going to deal with how dementia can affect a person. And there are numerous ways in which people will be affected. No one person living with dementia is the same as another. Just the same as no one person without dementia is the same as another. Now, I'm going to sort of pile into this quite quickly, so you may need to stop and start a few times. So the sort of common symptoms that you might notice in people you see or meet are, for example, slow processing of the incoming data, because if a person's brain isn't functioning properly, maybe in a particular area, and as you're probably aware, there are, well, I think there are well over 100 different types of dementia, but the common ones are Alzheimer's, vascular, frontotemporal, and Lewy bodies. That affects, those between them affect probably about 95% of people with dementia. but all of us have in common that there's some parts of our brain aren't working properly. So depending on which bit it is, that bit will find it more difficult to process what a person sees and hears and feels and touches and so on. So we may well take longer to just be able to think about what someone said or what we've just seen, or that there are some steps in front of us in order to actually work out what to do, which would be totally easy for anybody without dementia, but with a brain that isn't working properly, it takes longer. We may have difficulty accessing our memory, maybe memory of what we did yesterday, or it might be memories further back. But generally speaking, the most recent memories become more difficult more quickly than the older memories. And at the same time, tied up with that, we may well find difficulty with finding words to be able to just simply put together a sentence. As I said, we're all at different stages, we all have different symptoms, but if someone you're dealing with is having difficulty actually just replying to you, just give them time. Don't try and fill sentences for them. Don't give them words. Just allow them to think, and often it will come in the end. It might take it might take half a minute or something of just sort of, oh, what's that word? What's that word? What's that word? It usually comes in the end. Another common thing is when people start to get a bit wobbly on their legs. It might be to do with balance, especially as, and this applies to me actually. If I'm walking along and I look up, I will often start wobbling. If I don't look in the direction I'm going, I'll often wobble. I may. Another thing is perception of distance can go wrong, and that's where driving can become difficult. Depth of, for example, a step or colours of floors, working out. I mean, I know it sounds ridiculous, but some people with more advanced dementia may well mistake a floor pattern or colour for a hole. You know, if you've got a dark mat at the front door, there are people who will not step on that mat because they think it's a hole. You can have patterns like sort of very vivid parquet flooring or something, or for that matter, some of the hotel carpets that have zigzags and lines and things in them that can make it very difficult for someone who's already a bit wobbly and who can't work out what they're looking at quickly, just because their brain's not working fast enough. Wayfinding, finding your directions to things, whether it's in the house or out in the village or wherever, can be difficult. And people do sometimes get lost when they're in the later stages. Hearing is often impaired. There's something like 80% of people who are diagnosed with dementia also have a hearing impairment, and that is often actually missed. So somebody you're talking to, especially over the phone, might not be able to understand or hear what you're saying. So make sure you look at them. They can see your face, your mouth moving, because a lot of us start to lip read, not totally, but just as a helpful prompt. Sleep impairment is a big issue for a lot of people. Just changes in pattern, and as maybe early, maybe later stage, it may be due to medication, it may be It may be due to lack of exercise, who knows? But sleep impairment is quite a common symptom. Sudden changes of mood and loss of inhibition. So people may start saying things that they wouldn't otherwise have said earlier in their lives. People can, suddenly, for no apparent reason, become very angry. We're all different. So don't take this as something to look for in everybody. Simply, frontotemporal dementia, for example, is associated with changes of mood and personality in particular. And the last one I've got down here is difficulty making choices. One of the worst things you can do for someone with sort of moderate to advanced dementia is ask them to choose, because it becomes incredibly difficult to weigh up, to think out, well, do I want that? I mean, like, for example, what do you want? Hospital bed. You're in hospital, you get asked, what food do you want? Oh, God, what do I want? Do I want a sandwich? And in which case, what do I mean by sandwich? What is a sandwich? What does it look like? What does it have in it? What's my favourite sandwich filling? Have you got it? Or look at a menu in a restaurant, and someone whose brain isn't working properly will not be able to work through it. So you restrict choices in some situations. You don't say that, you don't tell people what to do, but you allow them a simple choice rather than a complex choice. So you give them a choice of 2 meals and explain and show what it is, for example. The best menus in hospitals, for example, are the ones which have pictures on them for people with dementia. Okay, so if you're asking someone to choose whether on a date to come in for an appointment or something, if they have dementia, they may find that quite difficult, and you might have to sort of find another way around it, or just give them a date. And people just need guiding, not for decisions to be made for them, but to help them to have time and capacity to make them. And I mentioned capacity. There is a lot of myth about people with dementia losing capacity. Yeah, eventually we may well do. But capacity varies, it fluctuates. You can have capacity in the morning one day and lose it in the afternoon. And that's actually quite common with sundowning with dementia. So even with someone who's got advanced dementia, doesn't mean they can't make decisions for themselves, but you'd have to assess that at the time. So that's the bit on sort of typical symptoms that you might come across. So what implications would I say there are for general practice in terms of making it easier for people to access general practice, doctor, nurse, and to get the care they need? Okay, so again, I'm going to whiz through these a bit. Firstly, what do we find difficult? Think of barriers. Think about barriers to what a person can do if their brain isn't working properly. So a barrier, your e-referral forms, they're incredibly complex to someone who's, assuming they can use the technology. Even then, if someone's brain's beginning not to work very well, to actually keep making choices in that e-referral form, is it you? Is it someone else? Is it, choose the symptom out of this list. And I might make the point that the symptom list does not include dementia, it doesn't include diabetes. So if I find that I often want to make send in a referral form in order to get some advice or whatever on something to do with my diabetes, or for that matter dementia, I have to sort of invent a way around it, which is incredibly difficult. And most people won't be able to do it. Telephone conversations can be I mean, even in the best of circumstances, if your hearing is impaired, if your thought processes are impaired, and if you've got a typical home telephone with a dud speaker in it, it's very difficult to tell what anybody's saying on the other end. I mean, we got rid of ours, so I rely on an Apple phone now, which has a much better speaker in it. So, you know, don't expect a person on the other end of a phone to be able to understand everything you say first time, and be prepared to slow down a bit. Don't treat us like children, but just slow down a bit. Articulate your words clearly and give us time to respond. I might make the point also that your EMIS system can flag that we have dementia or that someone is a carer. It can flag it if you would make adjustments to the settings, so that the first thing you see when you open a patient's record is dementia or carer, okay, on the front page. Then the person dealing with that patient will know immediately that they have to adjust, for a person with dementia, adjust the way they deal with them, or for a carer, ask how they are, because carers need to be looked after, because they can't care for their loved ones if they're not well. So they should be not just listed on your system, but flagged. And Plas Finan practice in Oswestry is doing just this now. I talked to them last year, and they are making that change. If I'm using the phone, which I don't often do because I don't particularly like it anymore, but if I am using the phone and I've got to wait, and I know all the things about this isn't whatever I say here, I'm trying not to be critical, because you are under stress. I know that. But when I make a phone call and I have options, which, you know, that's choices every time, choices. Someone with dementia is going to find that difficult. And I made a few errors, which means you usually have to sort of put the phone down and start again. Then you wait, right? If you want to make an appointment, it usually takes 15, 20 minutes before your phone gets answered. So you wait, you put your phone down, you go somewhere. And by the way, when you are on hold on the phone, your practice telephone system plays music. It's not great music, but it's something. But the volume is set on your system so high that it forces us to turn our volumes down. And then when your receptionist comes back on, we can't hear them because the volumes aren't linked. They're not balanced. So a little thing, could you please turn the volume down on your music? Yeah. Problem is, we were waiting for 20 minutes and I've forgotten by the time it's answered. I've forgotten what I wanted to say. It's like waiting in a waiting room, especially when you've got the radio on. Another thing that's really, really annoying. You've got a radio on. So I am there sitting in the waiting room or on the phone thinking, okay, I've got to keep this in my head. This is what I want to say. This is what I want to talk about. And then I hear some bleeding 1980s pop song that sort of becomes an earworm, and I can't. We need peace and quiet, basically. I'd be really grateful if you could turn off the music. It's unnecessary and it's really irritating. And in spite of the music, if someone's at reception, we can usually hear what they say. So the trick is, if you have something private, don't say it at reception. It's very difficult for people with dementia to remember what was said in a consultation, whether it be a nurse or a doctor or whoever. So what I sometimes do is I'll either make notes on an iPad or phone, or I'll take my notebook with me. And I know one or two other people around the country who do this, and they either write it themselves or get the doctor to write, or the nurse or whoever. So they've got that record to take home. And another thing you could do is, and it's done in some places, is have a little prompt sheet that people with any sort of cognitive difficulty could use to use in advance, to write down, you know, these are the things I want to say. This is what I want to say. This is what's concerning me, and just take it with them. Now, if you made that publicly available, it's very simple. It would help people a huge amount because it helps them prepare. I mean, we have 8 to 10 minutes of your valuable time. We need to be as concise and as possible, and we know that, and it puts us under pressure, and pressure and stress makes us lose our mind again. When you ask someone with dementia how they are, and this can apply to anybody, but in particular with dementia, and they say, "Oh, I'm fine," just ask again, because it's often people are not fine. They say they're fine because that's what one should do. So don't assume because someone says they're okay that they are okay. Just ask again. Really? Are you fine? Any problems at the moment? You know, just and a little thing that I came across in one practice. I think I found it online, but in a discussion, it was that a particular GP down in Telford, it was, had this wonderful way of when they dealt with one issue, the GP would say, "And what else can I do for you? What else do you need help with?" And instead of having one thing done and having to wait and make another appointment, blah, 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 it enables people, and I know it takes longer, it enables people to go through for most of us, the multiplicity of things that we actually need to talk about. So on that subject, in terms of time, please could you make it publicly known that you're offering double appointments to people with dementia? We need extra time. We need more time to think our thoughts out. I mean, I'm fairly early stage, but there are days when I can't think my thoughts right, and I'll forget, and I'll come out, and half an hour later I'll think, "Oh, why didn't I mention this or that?" Or even as I walk down the corridor. So again, if the fact that I've got dementia flags up on my record, immediately the receptionist opens it for me to make an appointment, then you can say, "Do you need a double appointment?" You know, ask people. And I hope people would say yes when they need it. The last element of this is going to be about the environment. And you may well have read stuff or heard people like me in the past talk about the importance of the environment. So things like, the idea is to get rid of barriers, okay? Barriers, not physical barriers, although sometimes they are, but barriers that may be invisible to you, but affect us. So, for example, having labeling on doors. Now, I know you've got people who, you've got staff who move around different rooms all the time, but that's incredibly complicated for us. It's all right, I suppose, if someone comes out and gets us. And I know you do that more now than you used to. But labels on doors for, Dr. Willis or Nurse Thingamabob, that would be very useful, but it would mean you've got to change them each time someone changes. So that's not easy, I know. So I suppose the easiest way is for people to collect from the waiting room. One thing you could do when you're considering redecorating at any time in the future is to choose some choose different door colors. So a door that is for a patient to use would be a color, but a door that is not for patients would be matched with the wall color, like white or something. Because the more invisible a door is, the less likely anybody will think it might be a place to go in. They do it. It is done in hospitals. It's done some in places. It's done in some mental hospitals. It's done in dementia wards. It's done in some GPs as well. I mean, we don't expect. I wouldn't be asking you to do it specifically, but when you actually do redecorate, have a think about that. Lighting. I know that going through that first part to go to the doctor's rooms after leaving the waiting room is quite dark. I think that would be quite nice if it was lit better. And there's also the option of going upstairs, I think, which some people might find quite difficult. But as long as you're guiding, but you don't tend to guide people out. You guide people in from the waiting room, but you don't guide people out. So someone could get lost going out. You haven't got steps. Your flooring's pretty neutral, so I'm not going to say any more about that. Okay, so overall, what I'm saying is be aware that someone has dementia when you're dealing with them. Be aware that they may have any of the symptoms I've described or others. And and be aware that you need to take your time and give them time, and make sure when you're talking to them, you're talking to their face. They can see you. It's very difficult when you get used to typing into a computer. But I know that I find it annoying at the very least, and sometimes I can't tell what's going on. When one of your staff stares at a computer and types and asks me questions at the same time, that is really, really difficult. Make sure that if someone has hearing aids or needs them, make sure they've got them in and they're working. There are loads of people with dementia and hearing aids whose hearing aids don't work because nobody's changed the batteries, or they're not wearing them because they forgot to put them in. It certainly happens a lot in hospitals. May happen less in the community. Depends. Now, thanks for watching this, and I hope you haven't taken it as criticism. It's very much about how you can work differently to make it easier for people with dementia to use your surgery and your services. Okay. As you get older, and if you have dementia, and you probably, like me, have a number of other conditions as well, you'll need to talk about various things like drugs you're on or blood sugar or whatever it might be tends to increase. So you see a lot more of us. So, and we need to see you more. So the easier you can make it for us to access you, I don't mean just to walk in and, immediately see someone, but if you can find a way of making it easier for us to contact you, well, that would be fantastic. I do know that in some places there are GPs give sort of a particular patient that they've come to an arrangement with, maybe their secretary's email address or something, so they can get in touch easily. It's not a question of wanting priority treatment. It's a question of wanting to be able to get over the disability that's making it difficult for us. And I could quote the Equalities Act and the fact that we have disability, and therefore you should be making adjustments to make it easier for us. Just, throw that in. So if you want me to come in anytime at all, let me know. I'm happy to work with individuals or groups. I do a lot of this stuff, so I'm happy to do it and help. So in the meantime, thank you for watching and listening.